Much love to Brother Marcus for allowing me to be a host today again. I'm back again, and hopefully many more times. I wanted to start off by asking, what was like your initial introduction to being in the field you're in? And for those who don't know, I know you're a little well known around the city, but for those who don't know, please tell them what you do.
So I am a filmmaker. I'm from the South Side of Chicago, Auburn, Gresham.
Okay.
Went down to University of Illinois, played 2 sports down there,
Okay.
got injured, came back to Chicago, started as a talent in the entertainment industry.
Okay.
Oddly enough, I went from being a linebacker, dropped about 70 pounds, and they used to do runway modeling.
Now I see it. Now I see it. I see the stockiness.
I used to model, man, on Billboard, like all that type of stuff. But it was a natural progression to get into acting, commercial work.
Okay.
And then from that went on to Second City and training there and things of that nature. So that's how I met a lot of comedians and performers. I'm not a stand-up comedian. I just was in that space a lot. I was training for improv to be a better actor. So eventually, you get tired of waiting for an opportunity. You get tired of waiting for a casting director to say, we like you, we want to cast you in this. And I had always had a knack for bringing people together and being a community leader, so I just applied that as an entertainer. So I was on set networking from everybody from craft services to the directors, and eventually, over time, people know you, they know you're a good person. It's all a relationship business.
It really
anyway.
is. It really is.
And at the end of the day, if I'm gonna be on set with you for 18 hours, I need to know you cool, you're gonna be chill. So that helped a lot. I also come from a background, family full of clergy and business leaders. So all of that stuff added into me just being in this field. I just applied it. And so a lot of what I've been able to do hasn't just been because of maybe, the artistry of being a filmmaker or performer. It's because of those other things, those intangibles that I apply. I really feel like I could have been in any profession. I still would have applied those things to it. But before I came to Chicago, there was one thing that really at least planted the seed, and that was my sophomore year of college. I was in Atlanta, which is like my second home, and my family was managing a property in the area that Tyler Perry was filming one of his films. And long story short, I wound up being an extra in the film because the casting director saw me leaving out. Next thing you know, the next day I'm sitting down in a one-on-one with Tyler Perry just like this, and presents the opportunity for me to continue as in the entertainment industry. And I respectfully declined at the time because I had not invested in the entertainment industry. I didn't think that's where I was going. I was a sophomore playing college ball, and I thought that that's what it was going to be. So when that was clearly not my future, when I came back to Chicago, that's when everything else I just mentioned kind of took off. So in the back of my head, I had already seen a black man making decisions at a level.
Yeah, at a very high level.
At a very high level. So when I'm on set and I'm just paying attention to everything, I'm just thinking to myself like, man, there's not a lot of us around here, if any, but I saw what was possible. Yeah. And so when I would see certain things that I felt that could either be done better or tweaked here and there, or even just, for from a communications and branding standpoint. You know, you want to attract a certain demographic or population to consume your product, listen to whatever you're saying, but that's not what you're giving them. You know, that's not the product you're giving. That's not what you're distributing. How are you going to attract millennials? How are you going to attract more diversity? And again, it went back to me paying attention to decision makers. It just appeared to me that the individuals making the decisions were not the same people that they were trying to sell a product to.
Exactly.
And that was the case.
And there's a large disconnect. And it's kind of, now it's becoming more obvious because we see people from closer to our generation making more of a splash in that industry because they're not so far removed from the audience they're trying to appeal to.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just, I was listening to, I think it was The Dream, and he was talking about Jay-Z, and the guy was just asking on the interview, was like, man, what makes Jay-Z so different? He's like, he's just smarter than everybody, but not in the sense that like there's something magical that someone else doesn't have. They were like, if you pay attention to a lot of stuff he does, he just pays attention. It's like you guys can see everybody's looking at the same thing, right? You want a diverse audience to listen to what you are producing or watch what you're producing, but your board is not diverse.
Nope.
No one in the decision making room is diverse.
Yep.
And so you're gonna spend so much time trying to figure it out. When really where you just need to start at is just
different background. People with different backgrounds.
Switch it up a little bit. And so what happens is you take that environment, you take a person like me that comes from that background, and then there is, I was a linebacker, so there is some tenaciousness in what I do, but you take that and Creative Cypher works because it's doing something that institutions and entities that have resources to do just don't, because they don't get it. So, you know, at the end of the day, I feel grateful to be able to do what I'm doing as a resource bank, meaning Creative Cypher, but a lot of it is literally just execution. It's not a new idea. It's just, as Barack Obama said, we are who we're waiting for. Do it.
There it is. So is that kind of why, so the diversifying a board or like having more of a connection to the community or the demographic you're trying to appeal to, is that more of the reason why you chose behind the scenes? Because I know you said you started off as a talent, at least in the sense of modeling and voice acting and a few other things. So is the diversification of the board or like making sure that the community you grew up in are now like giving resources to now has that connection to like, okay, we're supplying to this community, so we need people that reflect this community behind here, men, women of color, and of different backgrounds and different levels of,
I think I should say, I know for Creative Cypher, the diversity part was organically a part of the conversation. It wasn't the initial conversation. The initial conversation was, we don't ever want to be in a position where we have to ask for permission, period. That was it. So in order to do that, and you start to study the game, then you start to realize, okay, this is why this group doesn't have access. This is why this group has to ask for permission. This is why this group has to sign to a label. This is why this group has to sell their intellectual property to a studio. And then you start to see, oh, the reason for that is because none of us are in that boardroom. Then it turns into, well, how do we get in that boardroom? So originally, I can't say that I knew that's not what, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. It was a journey. It was like, okay, how do we fix this problem? How do we fix this problem? Oh, the problem ain't right. The problem's not right here.
From foundationally.
The problem is over here. So now we got to change that. And so when we built Creative Cypher, it wasn't about reinventing the wheel. It was about making sure that artists had access to resources, a creative family, and educational programming, because we don't want to just give resources without some type of, skill set or tutelage or something of that nature, some advisory, because we want it to last. And that's why we call Creative Cypher a bank. We call it a bank. It has become what is known as a social ecosystem. And everything within that, think of it as a garden. That's Creative Cypher. And everything that comes out of that garden are the different projects. Good Network is a project that came out of it. Comedy Night is a project that came out of it. The films, they're all projects. But what we wanted to do was again, because our mindset was, how do we get to a point where we're decision makers? It can't be, you know, here's my portfolio, I did this project, that project. It's like, we need to be tapped into the infrastructure.
Period. Because then we can actually make a difference in the overall community. Most definitely. So speaking on that, so what sparked the idea for Comedy Night? Was it you being involved in Second City and kind of being involved with that comedy scene and just naturally saying like, you know what, let's make our own now? Like, you know what I mean? Let's make our own, put a lot of resources into it and see where it goes from there.
No, again, it was just another journey. It was it was another one of those things where we started down one track, and then I shouldn't say always, but I've grown to become, you know, a person that really counts, you know, their blessings. You know, and oftentimes we're surrounded by resources and individuals, but if we just talk to one another and know what one another needs, we're able to achieve a lot more through collaboration. So with that being said, a lot of the initiatives and projects that I've been able to do have come to fruition because I said, wait a minute, we would be working on something. I said, yeah, I do know individuals that can do that. Yeah, I do know a bunch of people. I do have access. But Comedy Night came out of, initially I was elected to the board of directors for the African American Arts Alliance, which is one of the several boards that I sit on. And the goal was to attract a younger audience to Black ensemble theater. That was the goal. At the same time, however, Jokes and Notes had closed on 47th and King Drive, which came out of All Jokes Aside years ago. So there was no platform for Black and brown comedians in Chicago. Black Ensemble wanted a younger audience. CYPHER Live, the event that we used to put on for our creatives, attracted the audience that Black Ensemble wanted. But we would do these multidisciplinary events and we'd have comedians. And so we wound up putting on live events to showcase the film projects, but we would have a spoken word artist, a comedian, and different elements a part of it. And I said, well, wait a minute. I think I could produce a comedy show. To me, it seems like I've got the venue, we've got a purpose, we've got access, we've got the performers, we've got the audience, it should work. And on a Monday night, which is not an easy night to do an event.
It's packed, I see it every time.
All the way up north, we packed Black Ensemble. Ryan Fest performed at it. It was a great event. And I found myself being in this position like a Russell Simmons, you know, with Def Jam. Creative Cypher to me was like Def Jam to Russell. Because Def Jam was an entity that allowed Russell to do other things. Creative Cypher has allowed me to do things like produce a comedy show. And being a filmmaker, I didn't want it to just be a live event. So we filmed everything. So we have 3 one-hour specials now in the bank that we're about to pitch to Netflix and some other deals.
They're gonna take it.
Because we have the resources to put that together. But again, a lot of it was just saying, okay, here's a problem, we want to solve it. And what do we already have access to make it happen? And then understanding that we have value that a lot of these institutions need to stay relevant. Basically, all they're saying is we need some Black people in here. That's not necessarily what Black Ensemble needed. They needed, their need was younger audience. So Creative Cypher, you have multi-ethnic, you know, you have diverse, multi-talented, tech-savvy, content creators, influencers. Those are all things that brands want to be a part of. So we built this thing that they all wanted a piece. So you guys want access, we want access.
There it is. So we're going to come back more to the community you're talking about, because I actually love that. That's literally the reason why I decided to get into being a platform that I am and providing performance spaces as well, or performance venues to artists who kind of don't understand how to get into that space in the industry. But I want to learn more about, I think people want to hear more about you personally, just a little bit. I'm not going to get into some of the other stuff, but I do want to know more about, I see just from social media and from talking to you from time to time over the years, you're always traveling. Every single time we talk, you're traveling somewhere, California, New York, somewhere. Like, you even just said you're traveling somewhere next week. I know it's for family purposes, but regardless, you seem to be someone who frequents a lot of places around, a lot of entertainment centers around the nation. So I want to initially say, like, what are some of your favorite just cities in the nation?
Some of my favorite cities, I'm gonna say Atlanta. I grew up between Chicago and Marietta, Georgia.
Okay.
That was, so that's home. I got a lot of family. Most of my family is Chicago, Atlanta, Nashville, LA. That's where we kind of spread out. So Atlanta's home. So that was cool. And I can always say that that's really where I got my start.
Yeah, most definitely. You just said
But,
that.
LA, I enjoy LA to a degree. Because when I go there for a purpose.
Yeah.
When I'm there, I really,
Don't
I've
just
never
sightseeing and just,
I've done it once, but I've always been there for something.
For
so I've
business,
always
yeah, most
had,
definitely.
an agenda, and it's always it's worked, smoothly for me. Miami's cool. I don't. New York was okay. I enjoyed it again. I was there for a project, but they had me staying in Times Square. So like after day 2, I'm like, all right, I get it.
Yeah, all the lights and that. So you got to close the
Turn
window.
this off now. I'm like, because Chicago is, to me, it seems like a nice middle ground between LA. LA is
That's what I
just
keep
laid
hearing.
back, but you need a car, man. It's
To go
it's
everywhere.
so spread
Everything
out.
is so spread. I haven't even been to LA yet, but we just went to San Francisco, and it's very, very, very far spread out. It's like
Yeah.
nothing is close.
I think if I didn't have, I'm grateful that I have family in those places, and I think
Yeah.
that that's really the most important thing. LA, of course, is the mecca. That's where everything. That's where a lot of things are going on. Although Chicago has broken records every year as far as production revenue generated. But if I didn't have the family I have in LA, I don't know if LA would be that.
That center?
with that center.
So what would the best place for entertainment be, would you say, from the places you just listed, LA, New York, and Atlanta?
Yeah, it's still gonna be LA.
Atlanta? That's
No,
what I keep
LA.
hearing. That's what I keep
Yeah.
hearing.
Yeah.
I got a lot of family down there too. Actually, when I first started doing audio, one of my biggest mentors was a family member who was down there. He's just like, superstars or whoever producer comes in and contacts somebody after you get your name out there. Like somebody will come looking for you eventually. Like as long as you're in the scene and you're like out there. He's just an audio engineer, so he's always working on stuff at a school. So inevitably, it's like, oh, somebody's nephew or cousin probably told somebody, like, hey, yeah, my TA at my audio engineering school, blah blah blah. But I've been hearing that was like since 2008. So I've been hearing it since then. I know it's been going on before then because he was an older person. So I was like, oh, there's actually a big scene down here that I'm not aware of. And now since social media is like kind of put a super light on that, and we got studios down there with the people always filming in Georgia. Marvel's always filming in Georgia.
I didn't even know until a couple of months ago, Black Panther filmed
in Georgia.
Specifically on Tyler Perry's lot.
Oh,
They
didn't
shot
know
on
that.
Tyler Perry. Like that dude, man. I'll never forget that when we wrapped up that meeting, he gave me contact information that's since that time has been dissolved because they went through a lot of changes.
Yeah.
But he was like, I'll be making movies for a long time. And I could only conceive that he was saying just making the movies. I had no idea
Went to the film
of the
space,
gravity,
yeah.
like the idea this dude is buying naval Air Force bases. Like that's not a normal purchase.
Nah.
You're not
That's
like
for the
renting a
space.
studio. This
Yeah.
dude is buying
The space
military bases and turning that stuff into studio. So he's in a position. I look at that and I'm like, that's a decision maker. But yeah, ultimately it's about access.
Yeah.
You want to be a position like a Prince that could move to Minnesota, that could live in Minnesota and not need to be in LA.
Yep.
And ultimately it goes back to the work.
Quality,
Individuals like that don't need to be anywhere. They don't need to be in LA. They
Not
don't
at
need to
all.
be in Atlanta. They're gonna come to you, or they're gonna make sure that you have a smooth ride if we need to bring you in for something.
Speaking on that, so I want to, just because one of my next questions kind of delves into like a little bit of what Prince faced as an artist during his time. I think that he, during like the time that he had to change his name and everything, he was facing some issues regarding like how a lot of artists, at least especially of color, are treated in the industry. Artists in general, especially musicians, are really skewed. So what are some of the things that you faced in like just being a black man in the industry that you felt have been like resistance, aside from like the stuff you mentioned earlier with like wanting to diversify a board? Like, do you think that was some of the hindrance for you getting those callbacks, or getting into some of the spaces where people would have been like, oh yeah, we need you in our next film?
Yeah, a lot of it still boils down to decision makers, and a lot of roles are not necessarily. There are plenty of roles that could go to any ethnicity, But depending on who's making that decision, they're going to cast who they want.
Most
You know,
definitely.
it's still a private thing, so it's their
Completely
project,
controlled, yeah, they're
you know,
allowed
so
to-
they
yeah.
can do it. So again, it still goes back to diversifying where the decisions are made, and sometimes it could be blatant things, and other times it could just be ignorance.
Yeah.
You know, why would you cast that person to play a pharaoh?
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
like-
like that type of stuff. It's just, oh well, you know,
They,
that was a no.
No, it just doesn't
No.
make sense.
Yeah, let me see who was in the room when that decision
Right,
was being made.
yeah.
You know, so it trickles down. So by the time you get to casting, you know, that's a byproduct.
There's already
of a
3 or 4
decision
filters that it
that's
went
already
through
been
to-
made. But if you look at individuals that are performers that can make those decisions, they usually have some brand equity.
Yeah.
You know, Will Smith. You see what he's, you know, what
Most
he's done with
definitely.
his
Dave
life
Chappelle,
and career.
and,
Dave
yeah, people
Chappelle.
that can do
I mean,
multiple
even in the
ones, yeah.
sports entertainment industry, look at LeBron. Like,
Yeah, he's doing a lot.
you know, it's the same thing. The idea is that when individuals believe that you are unaware, that when they think
they
that
will
you
take
are not
advantage of it,
intelligent
yeah.
enough to understand, whatever it is, it could be entertainment, sports, other forms of
Business,
business.
just like, yeah, finance and stuff,
Whenever
yeah.
an individual feels as though they have this power over you, then you're subservient, or that you are beholden to them in some capacity. That's when, oh yeah, that album was cool, but you owe me 3 more albums.
That's a good way to put that. So for the final question, I think we're wrapping up here. The final question would be, there's a renaissance obviously going on in Chicago. You just made reference to it, was saying like we keep breaking these revenue records every single year for production. So with this renaissance is obviously delving into all of the entertainment, comedy, music, TV, film. What do you think is some of the best ideas we can do aside, like, in delving into that idea of collaboration? Like, what can we do as a community of like independent entertainers to like really make sure that this like doesn't just like fizzle, you know what I mean? Like, and really explodes the way it should, like in Atlanta or a LA or a New York.
Support one another. And so I'm very specific when I say that, because I'm not just talking about collaborating. It's easy for me to support your project if I was a producer on your music video. So yes, we need to collaborate. But when your music video comes out, I tell people all the time, like, it doesn't just click like. You know, something as
Like,
simple as
ask
that, or
somebody to
share it,
for you.
or
Yeah.
something of that nature. It could be something as simple as that, all the way up to, you know, all right, so-and-so, you know, that person having a listening party, I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna be supportive of them. Unfortunately, historically, our market has had this issue where you hit a ceiling and you have to leave, which is why so many of the dope artists leave. You're like, oh, they're from Chicago? They're from Chicago? Yeah, they moved 20 years ago. They moved 15 years ago.
bumped their head on the
Chicago
ceiling,
has never, ever lacked talent.
Never.
Chicago has always been an incubator for talent. You mentioned comedy. Chicago's a comedy town. Second City's here.
Yep.
Steppenwolf, Goodman Theater.
Yep.
There's always been great institutions for performances. It's just been a matter of, is there an infrastructure for those individuals to stay here and thrive? And there hasn't, so they have to leave. Now, CineSpace Studios has helped change a lot of that.
Yes, they have.
There's a confidence that Chicago has. And when the Dick Wolf shows came here, Chicago Fire being the first one, networks started to trust more and more that they could come to Chicago and film everything, opposed to just shooting exteriors.
scenes,
So there are a lot of moving parts to it. You got tax incentives, there's a political side of it to make sure that there's incentives in place. But then to me, I think the number one thing is just technology. The idea that costs are not as prohibitive, where you look at someone like Issa Rae that started with Adventures of Awkward Black Girl as a YouTube show,
YouTube
and
series.
turned into, you know, continued to propel her and turned it into now Insecure, first look deal. You look at people like Lena Waithe, who's from Chicago. You look at what Common is doing as a musician,
And
that's turned into an
actor.
executive producer,
Yeah,
an actor.
exactly.
Chance is doing more stuff.
Even politically,
So there's never been a lack of talent.
Nope.
It's just been a matter of a lack of access to resources, and then the unfortunate, you know, the unfortunate deal of individuals not always being supportive of one another. So if you're an artist and you're coming up and you're saying you're giving it your all, but man, I don't have access, I can't get anybody to come out and do, anybody, so to speak, I'm gonna leave.
Most definitely.
And then next thing you know, they're like, oh, so-and-so just got cast in this. I know actors that have moved away from Chicago.
I know people too, personally. Yeah.
That when they moved, they got cast on a Chicago show that they couldn't get cast on while they lived in Chicago.
That's insane.
And some of that still happens,
that,
but ultimately I think that when you can showcase that your brand has numbers, meaning that when you produce something, that there's a following for it, you have more leverage, and the confidence in what you're doing starts to grow.
It definitely does.
So we really have to support one another. Collaborate, it makes it easier to produce the work, but support the work, it makes it easier for it to sustain.
That's true. Well, Troy, thank you so much for joining us today. Once again, this is Everyone Has a Story. I want to thank Brother Marcus again for having me on here as a host. I'm Tertiary. This is Troy Pryor, the creative CYPHER. Thank you so much for listening and watching.